Good evening, everyone. let me try that again. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. This is a last webinar for this month, and in fact, I'll be taking off the next 2 weeks. And part of the reason is I'm actually off to a one-week medical conference down in Arizona on issues related to the GI system and detoxing, and then at the end of October and early November is the ILADS conference out in Boston. So I'm going to be out there too. So I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. So this is our last time for a couple of weeks here, or for the next 2 Thursdays, that is. So anyhow, just wanted to make everyone aware of that. For those of you that are new here, the way that these webinars work is you create them, and you create them with your questions every week. And every week it's a little bit different. It all depends on where we go. And sometimes we get into a theme of questions, even though I don't think that is necessarily what's planned. I don't think people are talking together and thinking they're going to ask some more questions. I pretty much take the questions as they're presented one at a time. For those of you that are participating in the live version of the webinar, I will take your questions and post them so you can read them at the bottom of your computer screen. For those of you that are in the recorded versions, though, you're not going to be able to see those. So I will read the questions out loud too. So for those of you that are not familiar with how these webinars work, you create them again with your questions. And there's a chat box over here on the right-hand side of the screen down at the bottom where you can write your questions to me. Okay. The only thing I ask is as you're writing that question, do not hit the enter key until your whole question is done. If you happen to hit the enter key before that whole question is done, it creates many small questions that make it hard for me to follow from this side. I am doing a recording of tonight's webinar, and I hope to have that posted and ready for you early tomorrow morning. But at the latest, it should be out somewhere between 9 and 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. After these webinars are over, I have to do a little bit of editing work, and sometimes that goes well and sometimes it doesn't. So we'll see how that goes. And so many of you that have been following the last couple of weeks know that I've been having some computer update problems where my computer no longer could keep up with all of the Windows updates and became very sluggish and slow, resulting in poor video quality. I hope that's corrected tonight. I've done a couple of new test runs with my new computer, and it seems to be recording very clear and showing to you very clear. Let's hope that that is actually happening tonight as we're doing this. So yes, I did finally break down and go out and get a new computer here. Let's see here. So tomorrow morning, if you happen not to get the email from me, you can find a copy of the recording in a number of places actually. One, you could go to Facebook, to facebook.com/treatlyme, TREATLYME, and I usually put it on my Facebook page. Second place that you can go is to my Lyme disease information site, treatlyme.net, and you'll find it on both the front page and then also on the webinars page as well too. Third place you can find it is to go to my Lyme disease supplement store, Marty Ross MD supplements. And on the homepage, if you scroll down, you'll see a version of that recorded video as well too. Okay. All right. And then one more piece of information. I know many people are wondering when I'm going to be back in practice. As many of you know, I've relocated back from Austin, Texas, where I've been this last year, and I'm in the process of trying to get reopened here in Seattle. I'm having a really hard time finding a space that's going to work out. So I was near one in a negotiation with a landlord, and it didn't go well for various reasons. A second place I've been looking at, I discovered there was mold in there, and there's somebody that treats mold toxin illness. I can't do that. So I'm still looking. I've got a number of possibilities, but I don't have anything secure yet. Having said that, on Monday, I'm going to be launching my new clinic website. And that URL, for those of you that want to know what that's going to be, it's martyrossmd.com. So Marty, MARTYROSS, the letter M, the letter D.com is the website for my new clinic. And my new clinic is going to be called Marty Ross MD Healing Arts. And on that website, beginning Monday, you will be able to schedule to see me to do an online consult. Many of you know that I had a way that people could visit with me, that they never came to my office to do where I would do a physical exam, but they could still visit with me online to get valuable information that they could use on their own or share with their healthcare provider. The limit of those visits is I can't prescribe or I can't order tests, but I do provide you a detailed note that if there are prescriptions needed, there are tests that need to be done, you can share that with your physician or your healthcare provider. And so I am going to be restarting those visits in the middle of November when I return. Actually, the first week in November when I return from all my conferences, and beginning Monday, the scheduling system will be open for you if you do want to try to take a look at doing one of those visits. If I've never visited with you before, I suggest a 1-hour visit. If you're interested in something, if I've seen you before online, I would be able to do the visit in a 30-minute, okay? And you'll be able to schedule those yourself. So anyhow, MartyRossMD.com, beginning Monday, I will start taking appointments for online visits. The only thing about those online visits, again, I can't prescribe nor can I order tests, but I can give you information that I write down and provide to you in a doctor's note that you can then share with your healthcare providers. At this point, in terms of getting my clinic back open and being able to see people in person, it's probably looking like it's going to be closer towards the end of November or early December. I've got a lead on a couple of good places here, but I think by the time we get in there and get them situated, it's going to be around the early part of December. All right. So anyhow, I know I've been asked quite a bit about that, so I just want to bring that up here in the beginning. So enough me gabbing about me. Let's go ahead and get started and talk about the questions that you all have here tonight. All right. Bear with me one more thing here. Okay. All right. So first question is from Trisha. Hi, Trisha. Let's see. One of my mother's Lyme symptoms is that she has weakness during the day, but feels fairly okay in the evening and through the night. When she has the weakness, it affects the mobility of her arms and legs. She also cannot see as clearly. Is this typical of Lyme or co-infections? And is there anything that can help it? She is on your herbal protocol and charcoal for ochratoxin A. She had success with IV doxycycline years ago, but relapses on oral antibiotics. A new doctor has just started her on Septin, which she has not been on before. When first diagnosed, she had a bullseye rash, positive Western blot, positive for Bartonella and Babesia. Okay, bear with me. I just need to look at the beginning of your question here. Trisha, Lyme has a very different way that it presents in different people. And there are some symptoms and the ways that they show up that I never see more than every now and then. I haven't seen anyone with this type of a pattern of being worse in the daytime, but better as the evening comes on at night. Often it's the other way around. So I would not say that's a common pattern that I would think is necessarily as part of Lyme, or is necessarily part of Bartonella, or is necessarily part of Babesia. Okay, I can't say that. To figure out if it is Lyme or Bartonella or Babesia that is necessarily active, to give you a solid opinion on that, I would likely need to do some kind of a visit. I'd have to ask a lot of questions because I can't tell just by this brief description here. But what I can tell you is I don't know that I would call this a pattern that is necessarily typical for Lyme or typical for Babesia or typical for Bartonella. But I will also tell you Lyme occurs in very different ways in many different people. And there's one thing that a point that you might want to consider with your mother, and that is, and this is for anyone that is still been on antibiotics for some time and is not getting better or continues to have recurrent symptom problems. There's a couple things that you might want to think about. Okay. Number one, when you have chronic infection in you, any person that has chronic infection, whether it's chronic virus infections, whether it's chronic Lyme disease, whatever that chronic infection is, one of the things that the immune system does is it makes a bunch of oxidizing agents to get rid of those germs. Okay. Oxidizing agents damage germs. The problem is those oxidizing agents can also damage the energy factories that are found in every one of our cells, and those are called mitochondria. By some estimates, each one of our cells has around 300 to 400 mitochondria per cell. And inside mitochondria is where sugar and fat are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions into cell fuel. Cell fuel is a chemical called ATP. Okay. Now, with chronic infection, and also even with chronic mold toxicity, for instance, too, one of the things that can happen is that those oxidizing agents lead to damage of the fat membrane of the mitochondria. And because of that, you wind up getting impairment of how well those mitochondria make energy. And without them making adequate energy, your immune system doesn't work right, your brain function doesn't work right, you can have low energy, et cetera. Okay, so every cell does not get the energy that it needs to help a person recover. So when I've got somebody that's, still having these kind of undulating courses where they're going here and there, they're not necessarily getting better, they're not necessarily getting worse. One of the things I like to do at about 9 months or more into my treatments is to start thinking about repairing the energy factories called mitochondria. Okay. Now, if that fat membrane gets damaged on the mitochondria, there's a couple things that happen. Number one, a damaged membrane makes it hard for sugar and fat to get to the inside of mitochondria to create cell energy. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing that happens is that healthy membrane needs to give electrons to a lot of the chemical reactions that create cell energy. And if it's damaged, it cannot do adequate electron transfer, giving of electrons to those chemical reactions either. Okay, all right. So and I've got an article that I've written about this. I will show it to you here in a minute, but I would consider doing mitochondrial repair in anyone that's kind of languishing and still going up and down about 6 to 9 months after treatment. Okay. And the things that you consider using are something to repair that membrane. One of the things I like to use is something called NT factor. It's made up of the fats that make up that membrane. You start at 2 pills 3 times a day. You do it for at least a couple months. If things are getting better, then you continue it for 4 more months at 1 pill 3 times a day. Okay. Another option made by the same company is called Research Nutritionals, is a newer product they have called ATP 360. It also rebuilds that mitochondria membrane, and it's got an ingredient in it that may even increase the mass, the size of those mitochondria. And that's a little easier to take. That's 3 pills 1 time a day. The only problem is it has coenzyme Q10 in it. NT factor does not. ATP 360 does. And if your mom is being treated for Babesia, it doesn't sound like she is from what you said here, but if she's being treated for Babesia with either Malarone, atovaquone, or Mepron, those medicines, CoQ10 makes them so they don't work. Okay, so either one of those. All right. Second thing that I like to have people do, and a minimum thing that I like to have people do when I'm considering doing mitochondrial repair, is to get on a good antioxidant to help lower those oxidizing agents. And what does a good job is glutathione. And I like using liposomal glutathione. That's glutathione microscopically wrapped in fat in such a way that it can increase the absorption of the glutathione, because glutathione gets destroyed in the stomach unless it's specially prepared by microscopically wrapping it in fat. And if you do microscopically wrap it in fat, it gets better absorbed, much better absorbed. Okay. And the product I like for that is something called Tri-Fortify by Research Nutritionals. And I would do 5 milliliters, which is 1 teaspoon 1 time a day of that. Okay. That's 2 minimal things I would do. In my article about mitochondrial repair, there's a couple other things I recommend. One is CoQ10. And something else called acetyl L-carnitine. Take a look at the article and see if the reasons to use those would fit with your mom, though. But at a minimum, the NT factor or ATP 360 along with the glutathione. Okay. All right. Second thing to consider, and this is something that's starting to get a lot more attention in the world of Lyme disease in the last few years. Well, actually, the last 2 years. And that is the idea that one of the reasons that people do not recover when they have chronic Lyme is that some of the germ forms turn into what are called persister states or persister forms. Okay. So you may be familiar. Many people that know about Lyme know that there's the spirochete. That's the thing that looks like a corkscrew. That's one of the germ forms. Okay. There's another germ form, which is called a cyst form of the germ that develops kind of like small blebs or hard capsules around them. Okay. So you got the spirochete, you got the cyst form of the germ. Okay. Now, both the spirochete and the cyst, when they are exposed to ongoing antibiotics, have the ability to turn into persister forms of the cyst and persister forms of the spirochete. All right. And what a persister is basically a form of the germ that slows its metabolism way down, way down. And effectively, it goes into hibernation. And in hibernation, it basically ignores the antibiotics. It ignores the stuff we throw at the germs, okay? All right. So there's been some discussions about how do you deal with those persisters. One is to use an antibiotic called dapsone. It's an idea that Dr. Horowitz came up with. I've got articles about that. One is to use essential oils. There's some reasons to look at doing that too, and I'll show you where you can look at that article here in a minute. And then the newest idea is to use a medicine that we historically have used to take care of alcoholics and to help them not drink, and that is a medicine called Antabuse. And what Antabuse does with alcoholics is it limits the breakdown of alcohol so they get toxic from it really fast, okay, and they get sick, quite sick. But there's some lab experiments that show that it actually can treat persistent Lyme. And so there's a colleague of mine, Dr. Ken Liegner, out in New York State that has done some, published about 6 months ago, a study or some his experience, I should say, using that medicine on 3 patients in his practice. And it showed some promising results, okay? There are a number of my colleagues that are starting to use it, and they're all reporting some good benefits from it as well, too. I do think it's too early to say whether this is going to be the drug that helps everyone or not. And in fact, at the ILADS meeting coming up in November, I'm going to have a chance to sit down with Dr. Liegner and actually talk with him a little bit about his experiments or his experience. And then when I kind of get my clinical practice going here in Seattle, that is one of the drugs I want to try on my patients that are having a hard time. Okay, so let me show you a few resources because I basically have given you some homework. I hope I've given you some things to look at least a rationale for why. Okay, so number one, so I'm going to do a screen share here. Okay. And so this is my Lyme disease information site, which is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. Many of you are familiar with it. Okay. And what you want to do is take a look at this, my online Lyme guide here. All right. And look at the chapter I have on energy and fatigue right here. And in here is my article about how to fix mitochondria and get energy in Lyme disease. Okay. So I would take a look at that. Okay. Second thing that I would take a look at is this chapter on infection treatment plans. Take a look at my article. This is a bridging article that has many different ideas on it about how do you approach persister Lyme. Okay, so it talks about what persisters are. And in here, I talk about the various ways that you might go about treating it, including the dapsone that Horowitz writes about. And I also mention new ideas where I talk about antabuse. And then I do have an article on antabuse. And this one is called, Is this the Lyme Magic Bullet? Is antabuse the Lyme Magic Bullet? Take a look here and you'll get some ideas about antabuse as well too. Okay. All right. So I would do mitochondria repair, and I would consider changing the regimen so that it's doing something to deal with persister Lyme. Okay. And the ways you can deal with persister Lyme that I write about, one is antabuse. Another one is dapsone. Another way is to do long-term pulsing where you're on antibiotics for a couple months and then you're off of them for a couple months. And in my article, I explain how that might work. Okay. And then I would also consider for persisters, possibly doing some essential oils is a way of doing that. And the product I like using that has essential oils in is something called Biocide and LSF. And there's reasons based upon research from a Dr. Zhang, who's been doing a lot of research on persisters, to show that maybe essential oils can make a difference as well too. Okay. All right. It's a lot of stuff. Good luck, and good luck to your mom. Hello, S. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Good news. Some weeks back, you suggested that my symptoms may be due to zinc deficiency. I started supplementing with 30 milligrams of zinc picolinate, and I'm seeing improvements. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I vaguely remember, but I don't remember all the specifics, but I appreciate the feedback when I give out those ideas. So thank you very much. And I'm glad it's doing better for you. Yep. Or you're doing better, I should say. Hello, Patricia. Hold on here just a minute. Let's see. You have been stating that the studies on sexual transmission are terrible and flawed. Would you and other frontline Lyme treating physicians get together and be willing to do your own clinical studies? You and those other physicians are in the best position to do this, since you see and treat Lyme almost every day. Further, would it not be best to say take caution regarding sexual transmission of Lyme rather than give people a false sense of security by suggesting it is not sexually transmitted? So those are all good points. Patricia, what I would say is in the information I write about it, I say that it could be sexually transmitted. And I do give information that people that have Lyme can use to even discuss the possibility of this with their sexual partners. I mean, some people, for instance, may want to use condoms because we can't say for sure, or other ways to block transmission. Some may not. Some may choose not to because, again, the science doesn't say for sure yes or no as to whether it is transmitted. We just don't know. But I would err on the side of precaution on that too. You raise an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, many of us in the world of Lyme are in good positions to do experiments. The trouble is when we start if we were to do that with our practices, anytime you conduct studies, it winds up taking away from your ability to do patient care. And I, for one, especially when I was in practice and then I'm getting back into practice, I'm so busy doing clinical care, it would be hard to take the time to do studies, okay? And that's the reason many of us don't do it. It takes quite a bit of time to do that, gathering information. You have to spend more time with your patients, which essentially takes away our time then to do direct clinical treatment of other people as well, too. If we are in a world where there are a lot of doctors that were willing to treat Lyme and there wasn't a shortage of us, that might be a different issue. But I do appreciate that we are in a good position to do it. I would not have the clinical time to do it, though. All right. Thank you for that question. Hello, Alexandra. Let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. I'm currently treating Lyme disease with a Lyme literate medical doctor that uses pulsing, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I have all 3 Bs. After 6 months of treatment, I don't see improvement. I know that you've mentioned being skeptical about pulsing. Should I challenge my LLMD about the pulsing method? Yeah, so my feelings on pulsing, and I know some of my colleagues have a different viewpoint, but let me just tell you what it is. All right, so pulsing means starting and stopping antibiotics. And some people use a regimen like you're doing, the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Some people do like a 5-day on, 2-day off. So when it comes to pulsing, I think it is something that might be effective for some people with the Lyme germ. However, I am not a believer at all in pulsing for Babesia or for Bartonella. And so let me explain why. So Lyme replicates really slowly, meaning each germ in you has babies on a slow basis. And by some estimates, it may be a week to even a month that it takes to replicate, okay? So if you are off of Lyme antibiotics for a period of time, the germ load doesn't increase quickly. It doesn't, okay? We also know from experiments about persister Lyme, and these would be experiments out of Northeastern University by Dr. Lewis out of his Northeastern University lab, that if you do start and stop antibiotics, at least on Petri dish experiments, that it is one way to treat persister Lyme. Okay, now there's other researchers, Dr. Zhang out of Hopkins, that has shown that pulsing antibiotics does not help persister Lyme. Okay, so these are all Petri dish experiments. To be truthful, we don't know. No one's done human studies to know, does pulsing work or not work for somebody, okay? All right. Now, for the Lyme germ, I have seen benefit in some of my patients by pulsing, but I will also tell you that it doesn't work in everyone. So there are times I might try that with a person, but if I'm not getting anywhere, I will go back to continuous use of antibiotics, all right? Okay, so that's the Lyme germ. Now, the issue with Bartonella and Babesia is they replicate fast, okay? Bartonella, for instance, replicates every 24 hours. That means each germ in you is creating a replica of itself every 24 hours. So in theory, it makes no sense to me why one would go ahead and pulse antibiotics to treat Bartonella, because during that phase, when you're off, it's going to come back. And it's a similar issue with Babesia. So, I mean, you may want to take, I think on my, let's look at an article here. You might want to print off my article about pulsing. And I think I address the Bartonella Babesia issue in there and bring it to your physician. But hold on here just a minute. Let's see. Let's look at that together. All right. So pulsing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. In this article, I say do not use pulse antibiotics for co-infections, and that's because they replicate fast. Okay. What you could do, and every doctor is their own being, but you could literally go here. Although I don't have a print button on any of my articles, if you were to take your mouse and do a right click on it, you can get a menu that drops down like this, and then you could literally print, and you can literally print off the text of this article, okay, and then you could bring that to your provider and see if they'll take a look at what I have said about it, okay. Sometimes if a physician writes about it, sometimes my colleagues are willing to take a look at those kinds of things. All right. All right. Good luck to you, and thank you for that question. Hello, John. Let's see. According to Pamela Weintraub's Cure Unknown, Dr. Martz contracted Lyme from a tracheotomy secretions from a patient who had a diagnosis of ALS. And according to Chris Newby's Bitten, Dr. Willy Bergdorfer also contracted Lyme from urine of infected animals in his lab, his diagnosis being Parkinson's. Hence, would not the Lyme organism be a very strong presence in all body fluids? I think Lyme is everywhere. There is the possibility it probably is in our various fluids. I have not, and one concern I have is if we start thinking that, let me step back. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that it can be other than possibly the body fluids or sexual fluids, so ejaculate and also vaginal fluid, where there is some possibility it can be transmitted that way. We know it can be transmitted in breast milk. We know it can be transmitted in utero, so those kinds of fluids, okay? But I have not seen anything to say that it can be transmitted in saliva, for instance. I could be wrong, but I just haven't seen, I haven't seen any evidence, so what it could be wrong about it is that it's not, but I would caution that it probably is not. I haven't seen it spread that way in my patients, the sharing of toothbrushes and things like that. But you do raise a question. Maybe it is in our body fluids and can be transmitted different ways like that. All right. Thanks for our question, John. Good luck to you. Hello, Brenda. Let's see. Just started Antabuse disulfiram. Titration is 62.5 milligrams every 3 days for 2 weeks, then 62.5 milligrams every 2 days for 2 weeks, then 62.5 milligram daily for 2 weeks. Following this, you will increase to 125 milligrams every 3 days, 125 milligrams every 2 days, and then daily. Each dose will be completed for 2 weeks. Does this up and down titration sound correct? So Brenda, what I can tell you is I know that there are some people when they start at higher doses do have problems with getting into die-off reactions, Herxheimer reactions from it. I don't have enough working knowledge myself of using this medicine to know if we have to go this slow with all people. If it does lead to significant Herx reactions in a lot of people, this seems to make sense, okay? So again, I plan on starting to work with this medication in my practice, and I'll be glad to report back based on my experiences over the next months as I start getting back into clinical practice. And then I know Dr. Liegner is actually giving presentation at the ILADS meeting coming up out in Boston. So I'll be talking with him, and I want to hear his experience. And I'll be talking with my other colleagues as well too. But if you're on a medicine that can lead to significant Herx reactions, it does make sense to start low and slow. From the colleagues of mine that I have talked to that are using this in some of their patients, it can lead to significant Herxes. So this could be a reasonable regimen. I just don't know personally to be able to comment. Okay, thank you. Good luck to you. Hello, Bill. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. I've been treated for Borrelia, Mycoplasma, and Bartonella over the past 2 years. The clinical signs remaining are neuropathy in my feet, insomnia, cardiac arrhythmias, memory loss with brain fog, and nail bed dystrophy. My Lyme literate medical doctor uses the Arm and Elispot test to base his treatment on and has released me as I am in immunological remission. I just sent some blood to IGeneX for Western blot, IgG, and IgM for Bartonellas, and had a positive titer to both for Bartonella Vinsoni. I'm convinced I still have Bartonella, and I have just finished 2 months of an herbal blend of Psittacuta, Utiniet, knotweed, and hawthorn from wild-caught herbs, taking 1 teaspoon 3 times a day. Not much change in signs so far. Do you think I should give the herbs more time? The last antibiotic I took were 4 months of doxy, rifampin, azithromycin 1 year ago. Okay, so let me just make a comment. I know that, so I know a number of my colleagues are trying to use the Elispot test through Armin and other labs that do the Elispot as a means of seeing if the germs are still active in you or not. And I think they're wrong. I just think they're wrong in trying to use the test that way. Okay, so let's talk why. But to do that, I want to talk about what an Elispot test is. So an Elispot is a way, basically takes a type of white blood cell from your blood called a T cell. T cells are what fight and they attack germs. Okay, and it looks to see, do those T cells still remember fighting Lyme? Or do those T cells still remember fighting Bartonella? Or do those T cells still remember fighting Babesia? And the way that we look to see do they remember is that we take your blood, we take your T cells out, and then in a test tube, we introduce proteins from Lyme. And then for Bartonella tests, we introduce proteins from Bartonella. And for the Babesia test, we introduce proteins from Babesia, okay? And then we look to see, do your T cells release cytokines? And the idea is if they release cytokines, that means they recently remember having fought your infections, okay? All right, now, the problem with that test is it ignores the fact that one of the reasons that your T cells may not be remembering Lyme is if Lyme is hiding in you in a place they can't see it, okay? We know, for instance, that Lyme likes to hide in places that the immune system can't find it. Also, the problem with that idea when it comes to Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia is all of those germs can suppress the immune system. So if they suppress the immune system, meaning that there's a lot of those germs being active in you, and the immune system can't react because of that suppression, it means the testing may be negative when in fact the germs are quite active in you, okay? All right, now, the problem with doing a Western blot test. So Western blot, let me go back to the Elispot. So the Elispot works also with the idea that the T cells that are in you get cleaned out of you about every 2 months. Okay, so this T cell reaction test, the Elispot test, basically can look back and see what was going on over 2 months. But after 2 months, most of those T cells have died and been replaced by fresh ones, if you will. Okay, all right. So in theory, I mean, if the germs are out of you, in theory, the Elispot may be negative because those T cells will eventually die off. However, again, the reason I don't like it is it ignores the fact that Lyme can hide in you. And it ignores the fact that those 3 germs have the ability to suppress the immune system, making it so the immune system can't react against you. Okay. All right. Now, about the Western blot. The Western blot is looking to see, is your immune system having another type of reaction, which is it making antibodies that attach to the germ. So antibodies are proteins made by a type of cell called a B cell, not a T cell, but a B cell, okay? And those antibodies attach to germs, and they act like a signaling device to the rest of the immune system to say, hey, I got a germ, come and get it, okay? That's essentially is what what antibodies do. All right, now, once your immune system gets turned on to making antibodies, it's going to keep doing it, okay? So IgG antibodies, even when a germ is gone, they're going to still stay there, okay? And for some reason in Lyme, even though all other infections, IgMs go away, they're the acute antibody, they're what you get first, and they eventually get replaced by IgG. In Lyme, about 40% of people that have chronic Lyme still make IgMs even months, years after they've been infected, and we don't know why. So the idea is that if you have persistent antibodies, the best you can say is it means you have evidence of the germ having been in you. It doesn't tell us whether the germ is still active, okay? Likewise, if you try to go do an antibody test and suddenly they're gone, it doesn't necessarily mean the germ is gone. It may mean Lyme is hiding, or it may mean that all those infections are actually suppressing the immune system so it can't react, okay? So once, in fact, those tests have been positive, neither the Western blot nor the Elispot should be used to see if a germ is still active in you. That's not what those tests were designed to do, nor do they do it adequately. The only way that I have found to have some idea whether germs are still active in a person or not is to sit down, talk with them, and ask them about their symptoms. And if they've got a lot of symptoms that are suggesting Bartonella, then I choose to still treat for Bartonella. If they've got a lot of symptoms that still suggest Babesia, then I choose to keep treating for Babesia. Okay, all right. So those are my comments about that testing. Okay, now let me just look at what else you've said here. So you did 2 months of Sida and Hutania and the knotweed and hawthorn, basically for the Bartonella. So generally, what I've seen in my Bartonella treatments, okay, so I like using the Sida acuta and Hutania as part of my Bartonella treatments. I haven't necessarily used the knotweed or the hawthorn as part of them, but I can understand why you might use those too, okay? But whether you're using prescription antibiotics or herbal antibiotics, in general, when you are on the right treatment for Bartonella, you need to treat for about 4 to 6 months. Generally, that's about how long it takes to get rid of those germs, okay? And what I saw in my clinical experience in my practice is that if you were on the right regimen, by 1 to 2 months, the Bartonella symptoms should start lifting, not go away, but lifting. And so if by 2 months, in my patients, if they were not seeing adequate improvements, I would start thinking about changing my regimen, okay? All right. So let me show you the symptoms that I like to follow for Bartonella. All right. So in terms of the symptoms of Bartonella, take a look at my article about how to diagnose. And look at this article called How to Diagnose Bartonella and Chronic Lyme Disease. And basically in here, I do go through the symptoms of Bartonella. All right. And you can find them here in this section right here. Okay. So I would review that. All right. In terms of the issues I just raised about testing, take a look at my section here called Test. And then there's two articles you might want to look at here. One is there a Lyme done test? No. Okay, that's the stuff I just talked to you about. And then there's another one called Can the Elispot Lyme test forecast the end? And again, in both of these articles, I have made an argument that is not, you can't do it. There is not a done test or a where are we in Lyme test. Okay, and co-infections either as far as that goes. All right. Thanks for that question, Bill. Good luck to you. Hello, Megan. Hold on here just a minute. Hi, Dr. Ross. How can we become patients of yours? When do you estimate you'll have your clinic up and running? Do you already have a waiting list? Thanks so much. So happy for you that you'll be back in practice. Thanks for all you do. Okay. So Megan, I kind of announced at the beginning here tonight, but I want to, so if you are joining me late, listen to the beginning of the recording. I talked about that. I am not taking a waiting list though. What I would keep doing is checking back at my website that I'll be launching on Monday that will have a page for setting up for my online visits where I can't prescribe or order tests, but I can give you advice. And then I also have full service visits where you have to see me at least once in my practice where I get to clinically examine you. And then after that, I will periodically need to see you in person, but a lot of the visits we can do online or by phone after that. Those full service visits, I cannot start doing until I have a clinic location. But I'm hoping I'll have something ready to go by December on that. But take a look, just periodically check. I'm not taking a waiting list, but periodically check back at my website that'll launch on Monday, martyrossmd.com, where you'll be able to at least start signing up to do my consult visits, my online visits. And then eventually through there will be an announcement through there. There'll be a banner announcement saying, I'm open and ready to take appointments for my full service visits. You might just want to start checking back at that website about once a week. Okay? All right. Thank you. Oh, the other thing I should say, once I know where that clinic location is going to be, I will be sending out an email announcing that to all of my former patients. And if you're a former patient of mine, you'll get it through the secure email system I still have. It's called UpDocs. Okay. If you're not a former patient of mine, you can also get an email by signing up or making sure you're part of my email list at treatlyme.net, which is my Lyme information site. Or if you've ever ordered anything from my supplement store, Marty Ross MD supplements, and you subscribe to my email list there, you will also get that email announcing when I am ready to start taking clinical appointments. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Susan. Hi, Dr. Ross. I've been on biocidin for about 1 year now, following intensive antibiotic treatment for Lyme. How will I know when I'm ready to stop taking the biocidin? Thank you. So Susan, it depends on what you're using the biocidin for. All right. So if you're using it because you were still having symptoms, or you still think that Lyme was active, there's two points that I usually use in trying to decide if I'm going to stop treating active Lyme with germ killers, whether they're herbal germ killers or whether they're prescription germ killers. Okay. Those are antibiotics, by the way. Anyhow, I usually like to treat when I was treating, or when I do treat, I gotta start saying it in the present tense, because as I start treating, I like to treat until somebody is symptom free for 2 months, if we can get them to that point. Okay. But if I can get somebody to the point that they are symptom free for 2 months, I still like to use antibiotics for 2 months beyond them having symptoms, herbal or prescriptions, antibiotics that is, and then I'll stop. Okay. But as many of you know, and you know too well, that with chronic Lyme, sometimes we just never get all the way back 100%. And we have ongoing symptoms. We make it 80% better. We make it 60%. We make it 30% better. But at a point, we may have just plateaued out on all the improvements we can have. And so the other decision point would be is to treat until somebody is doing fairly well. And over a 4-month period of time, no matter what I do to get their treatment to improve, to get their symptoms to start getting better, using all kinds of alternative ways. And I'll show you the list of alternative things you can consider trying. But if you're plateaued for 4 months, then I consider stopping a full-on treatment too. And by full-on treatment, I mean full dosing of either your prescription antibiotics or your herbal antibiotics. Okay? All right. The other reason to use herbal or prescription antibiotics is as a preventive, and that is to keep your germs from coming back. All right. So I don't believe when somebody has had chronic Lyme of a year duration or more that we ever get rid of every germ in most people. The best we've done with our antibiotics and our supporting of the immune system and detox, all those things we do, the best that we do is knock the germ load down so the immune system can keep it under control. And sometimes it makes sense in some people, especially if they've relapsed before, to stay on something else besides to do more than just relying on the immune system to keep those germs down. Sometimes it makes sense to actually be on low doses of prescription or herbal antibiotics. All right. So, for instance, the Biocide and LSF, to do it to treat as a full treatment, I would do 2 pumps 3 times a day. But if you're using it as a preventive, you might do 1 pump 3 times a day. Okay. That's just an idea of how you could go about looking at that. All right. Let me just do a quick screen share here. All right, so a number of places you can look at the ideas where I said you might want to make sure you've done everything you possibly can to move your treatment forward. But one place we can find that kind of information, take a look at my treatment protocol, the Ross Lyme support protocol, okay? And if you were to scroll all the way, through here, I go through all the things you should do to get well as part of your treatment. Get sleep, be on a good diet, lower inflammation cytokines, be on something that helps your body deal with stress, which is called an adaptogen, balance your hormones, be on a good multivitamin, do things to support detox, exercise if you can. And all these things work together to boost your immune system, get yeast infections out in your intestines if they're there, treat your Lyme germs, treat your co-infections, okay? And if you're not getting much better, then you might want to start looking at this section, which is special considerations. What do you do if you're not getting better and you've done all this stuff for like 6 to 9 months, okay? And down here, I go through things to consider. One is mold and Lyme toxin illness. Another one is, could you possibly have a detox defect called MTHFR? Is it possible you have heavy metals? Do you have biofilm problems? Do you have chronic infection problems from viruses? Do you have injury of the mitochondria? Have you taken care of your co-infections adequately? So anyhow, those are some ideas. I would just take a look through this section, okay? All right. And then finally, the newest idea as part of that is, have you done something to treat persister Lyme? And I mentioned that earlier tonight as well. All right. Susan, good luck to you. Thank you for the question. Hello, Natasha. Hold on here just a minute. Let's see. Doc, I'm barely handling 1/16 of a teaspoon of cholestyramine pure powder once every 3 days. Is it possible I need to cut back to 1/32 of a teaspoon every 3 days to stop this Herx from just reintroducing cholestyramine after 10 months without it? The ochre toxin, which Dr. Nathan suggests is best dealt with through cholestyramine, is much lower than at many other times we tested throughout my treatment. I don't understand why the Herx is this bad with low numbers of all 4 mold groups. What other toxins does cholestyramine go after that could be causing this Herx? That's a good question. Natasha, I'm not aware that cholestyramine would be involved in removing anything else but mold toxins, okay? I'm not aware of it. Doesn't mean it's not, okay? But if it would be removing toxins, it would be removing fat toxins that have gotten into your intestines, all right? So mold toxins are fat toxins, and cholestyramine is a fat binder, all right? So basically, it's binding up toxins in your intestines so they don't get reabsorbed again back into your bloodstream. We are exposed to all kinds of fat-based toxins in the world around us. So, it's possible it's binding up some other toxins in your intestines so they don't get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. What those would be exactly, I don't know. I'm just postulating here, okay? Now, the thing is when you have toxins bound up in the intestine so they don't get reabsorbed back into your bloodstream, that creates a vacancy in the bloodstream of those toxins. And in our fluid dynamics and water and blood dynamics in the body, our body works to fill that void. And what it does is, where there's a void of toxins now in your bloodstream, toxins that have been stored in your tissues that are fat-based toxins will move into the bloodstream to fill that void. And it's the movement of those toxins back into your bloodstream that haven't been there for a while that then triggers the immune system to see them and to make too many cytokines. And so although you're calling it a Herx reaction, what you're really having is an excess cytokine reaction, too many cytokines being triggered from the movement of toxins back into your bloodstream to fill the void created by those ones you pull out of your intestines. Okay, all right. Now, the reason you're calling it a Herx is in a Herx reaction, which is a reaction that occurs from when you kill germs with antibiotics. The immune system sees the dead bug parts and makes cytokines. It's a similar thing. The immune system overproduces cytokines. It's just the mechanism is different. Technically, a Herx reaction is from killing germs, but you're getting a cytokine increase from moving toxins. Okay. So anyhow, I don't know what else it would be removing, but I postulate if you don't have mold toxins, it's probably pulling some other kind of fat-based toxins out of you. I would suggest that you back down to that 32nd of a teaspoon. And I suspect that when you get a chance to talk with Dr. Nathan again, he would probably suggest something like that too. Okay. Sorry to hear that, but I mean, back off. That should make a difference for you. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Natasha. Hello, Ruth. Let's see. Many women with Lyme seem to struggle most around their menstrual cycle, and hormones particularly can be impacted by Lyme. Do you ever recommend women take birth control to balance the hormones and also menstruate less frequently? I do not need birth control for contraception, and I have had my hormones tested, and there was nothing concerning found, though I'm only 34 and nights sweat around my period. You know, it's interesting. I have... there's not a uniform answer to that, meaning what works in one person may not work in another one. Okay. I have had some benefit in some of my women that had, the woman that saw me in my practice, not my woman, but women that saw me in my practice, of using, if they had severe reactions around their period and we just couldn't get it managed by making changes in other aspects of their treatment, I have had benefit in some of the women by doing continuous birth control, the way you would, for instance, if you're using continuous birth control for birth control, okay? Because if you use the birth control continuously, it knocks out the cycling of your hormones, which can sometimes be the thing that makes it so that some can get through their treatment better, okay? Now, that doesn't work that way in everyone, though. So I have tried using continuous hormones in some women that had severe cycling of their symptoms and just did not see any benefit by doing that and using the hormones, continuous birth control pills to knock out the period. Not everyone gets benefit from it, but some people do. So it is something to consider trying. All right? All right. Good luck to you, Ruth. Hello, Kelly. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I'm wondering how long is too long to be herxing? More than a week? If so, should you stop the combination of cat's claw and otoba bark? Secondly, how long should you continue to take this herbal combination once you're reached taking the suggested amount? Thank you so much for your help. So, Kelly, in terms of using those two herbs, the otoba and cat's claw, everyone, most of you probably know, those are my herbs that I find very effective at killing Lyme. And I started using them in my practice based on Petri dish experiments that were published based on the research by actually Dr. Eva Choppy, that's SAPI, who runs a Lyme disease research lab out of New England. And so her lab is doing some really great innovative work. She's one of the best bench scientists that we have, meaning she's doing laboratory experiments on Lyme. And she published a paper, I think it was almost 5 or 6 years ago now, showing that these two herbs individually did a great job of killing the various forms of the Lyme germ and removing biofilms. But when you put the two of them together, there's a whopping kill that happens, and you get almost 100% breakdown of the biofilm, the slime layer that covers Lyme germs that can sometimes block out antibiotics. So based on that study, those studies, her studies, that is, I wound up introducing the otoba and cat's claw into my practice. And really, I find it works as well as oral antibiotic, meaning I think it has about as good of a chance of helping as oral antibiotics. Any two oral antibiotics that somebody goes on, in my experience, those oral antibiotic combinations will help about 85 to 90% of the time. And I find a similar situation with the otoba bark and the cat's claw. They work about 85 to 90% of the time as well too. Okay, which means 15% of the time it doesn't work in people. Okay, so anyhow, my experience says that when they're working, I've had people be on them for a year, year and a half, even 2 years before. And so my decision to keep using them was always based on, are we still seeing improvements? Okay. Now, having said that, you need to give it time to see improvements too. All right. That's any Lyme germ treatment. So anything we use, whether we're using prescription antibiotics or whether we're using herbal antibiotics, there was an unpublished study by Dr. Stricker, who used to be head of ILADS, presented a study maybe 10 years ago. It's been a long time, but a number of many moons ago at one of the ILADS meetings, he presented the findings of a study he did in his office that he didn't publish. But in his study, he put people on Biaxin and Flagyl, 2 antibiotics, to treat Lyme, and then he watched how quickly they would improve. And what he found is that by 3 months, 30% of people started improving. By 6 months, 60% started improving. And by 9 months, 90% of people started improving. Okay, that's as I remember the study. And I see something similar in my practice. Okay, so what that means is by 3 months, only 30% of people will see any improvements at all, while 70% will not on a standard antibiotic regimen. Okay. All right. Now that's a little bit different than with Bartonella symptoms and with Babesia symptoms, because those germs replicate so fast, usually by 1 to 2 months. If you are on the right treatment for those germs, you should start seeing improvements. And if not, you need to change your treatment. With Lyme, on the other hand, whether you're using herbs or prescription antibiotics, it can just take time. I mean, it can take a long time for things to turn around. Okay. All right. So anyhow, I've used it for even a year and a half up to 2 years with some of my patients. Okay. In terms of Herxing getting long, I don't consider a week to be too long for a Herx. And I've had some people even go 2 and 3 weeks of Herxing. But by 2 to 3 weeks, you should start seeing some improvement in those symptoms. Okay. All right. Anyhow, those would be my observations about that. All right. In terms of Herxing, you should, if you are Herxing, take a look at the information I have about Herxing. To help limit that Herxing, definitely get on some curcumin is one of the things I like to use. I like using a liposomal form of that. Curcumin is a chemical that makes up a turmeric, okay, and it gets inside white blood cells and blocks cytokine production, okay. Remember I said earlier tonight, when you're Herxing, it's because your immune system makes too many cytokines. Well, we can tell your immune system stop making so many cytokines. And it's the curcumin that does that, a liposomal variety, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. If you're already on that, increase it to 1,000 milligrams 3 times a day. Okay. The product I like for that is Mariva 500. Okay. Research Nutritionals has another product that has some curcumin in it, but also has other herbs that limit cytokine production too. That's called Cytoquel. And you could do either 1 pill 3 times a day of that or 2 pills 3 times a day of that instead of doing the Mariva 500 curcumin that I was just talking about. All right. In addition to your herbs that literally limit the production of cytokines, you want to also get on glutathione. And the reason that people want to be on glutathione when they're Herxing bad is that it helps remove some of the toxins from the Lyme germ getting killed, because those toxins can trigger cytokines. Okay. Also, what it does is it decreases oxidizing agents that are triggering all those white blood cells to make cytokines. Okay, so you can kind of think of curcumin or Cytoquel as getting inside the factory, the cytokine factory production line, and blocking the production line. Okay, and what glutathione's doing is it's sitting out here saying it's blocking the orders from even reaching the factory, so the factory doesn't know that it's being called upon to make cytokines. All right. And so I like using a liposomal glutathione too. The product I like for that is Research Nutritionals. They do have some science about their product that shows increased levels of glutathione in red blood cells from people being on their product. And I find it helpful at about 5 milliliters once or twice a day. 5 milliliters is a teaspoon. Okay. All right. Let me just show you one other thing you may want to look at. I'll show you a few things here actually. All right, so back at my information site. Okay, so take a look at the Herxheimer and cytokines chapter, and you may just want to take a look at this article called "Herxheimer Die-Off Reaction Inflammation Run Amok." It talks about what to do to help get that under control. Okay, all right. For those of you that are interested in information about the otoba and the cat's claw, take a look at under my anti-germs chapter, this otoba bark and cat's claw tinctures article where I describe Eva Choppe's research. I know I also mentioned earlier tonight, biocidin is an herbal compound I like to use. Take a look here if you want to see the science about that as well too. Okay, all right. There's one other thing I'll have you take a look at that I just briefly mentioned here. Take a look at this section called Recovery Time and Odds. And in here, it talks about how long will it take to recover. So take a look at this getting healthy. Will I? When? How do I? And I mentioned earlier, can Lyme disease be cured? Here's my thoughts on that. I mentioned it earlier, but here's a whole article about that as well too. Okay? All right. All right. Thanks for the question, Kelly. Good luck to you. Hello, Marianne. Hold on here just a minute. All right. Hi, Marianne. Let's see here. Can you please talk about considerations about taking disulfiram? What foods and drugs and environmental chemicals or scents must be avoided? So again, with the disulfiram, the one thing is to start low and slow. That is one of the things. You definitely don't want to be taking anything with alcohol in it because it's blocking the enzymes that break down alcohol. So you're going to get build up with that alcohol and get sick from it, basically. I am blanking on. There's one other thing I wanted to say, but bear with me. Let me see if I can look in my article and see what I wrote here. Let's look at it together here. All right. So let's look at my article on antabuse. Bear with me here for a minute. I'm just looking through here. Gosh, there is something else that I want to say, but I'm blanking. I've got, so I'm not able to completely answer your question, and it's I guess I call it my post 50-year-old syndrome here. There is another medicine I think we have to watch in terms of an interaction. I am not aware though of other environmental chemicals that we have to be concerned about other than alcohol. But there is one other medication. I'm just blanking on it right now. All right, sorry about that, Marianne. All right, good luck to you. Hello, Sarita. Hi, Dr. Marty. After treating myself with the herbs for 6 months for Babesia, I feel tired a lot and in low energy. Is that common? What are some natural herb ways I can support my body? Thanks for your help. All right. So one thing I would point out, okay, and again, part of the problem with these webinars, I only get one piece of the story. I don't get to ask you a bunch of clarifying questions. All right. But if I could ask you a bunch of clarifying questions, what I would try to figure out is what were your symptoms of Babesia to begin with? All right. So what symptoms were you having? So symptoms that I try to look at that can say Babesia is active include having night sweats, having anxiety or panic attacks, being hot 1 minute, cold the next minute. Having fatigue can be one of those symptoms as well too. Some people with Babesia get a bunch of red little spots on their body as well too. All right. And there's some other symptoms too, but I'll show you an article you can look at. But see 6 months ago, go back and look at my Babesia symptom list that I'll show you here in a minute and see which ones did you have. All right. And see, did they get better over time? All right. Are most of them gone? All right. Now, for some people, Babesia can be a very, very fatiguing illness. And in fact, one of the signs that Babesia can still be active is severe fatigue. But if you look at the symptoms I'll show you about Babesia and you had a lot of them begin with and most of them are gone and all that's left is the fatigue, then usually what that would mean to me in my practice is that Babesia is not active anymore. If, however, you are still having most of those symptoms you had initially with Babesia and the fatigue, then it means you're probably going to want to approach changing what you're using to kill Babesia and try killing it with something else. Okay? All right? That's just kind of a general overview. Okay? Now, if your Babesia looks like it's gone and you're still just fatigued as all get out, there's a couple things that I would suggest taking a look at. Number one of the things that can help lift fatigue is to be on something called an adaptogen. Adaptogens are herbs that help the body deal with stress, okay? And most of them have been used in traditional medicine like Ayurvedic medicine and also in Chinese medicine. And they've been used for centuries because they've been observed in those cultures and in those ways of healing to help people under stress to give them better energy. All right. Now, we know that adaptogens, especially the one I like to use, which is called ashwagandha, there's animal studies that say that they work by improving adrenal and thyroid function. All right. So probably how people are getting better when they're on an ashwagandha is that in humans, most likely it's also supporting your adrenal glands, which is your stress organ, and your thyroid to work better. All right. So one thing, if you're not doing it already, and I build it as like one of the foundations in my Lyme disease treatment protocol that I showed you all earlier, is get on some ashwagandha. It comes either as a 400 or a 500 milligram pill. Typically, I carry at my supplement store a product by Organic India, which is a 400 milligram pill. And you want to take 2 in the morning and then 2 between 1 and 2 in the afternoon. I usually don't suggest people take it later in the day because in some people, it may have kind of a caffeine-like effect that may make it so they have difficulty getting to sleep at night. Okay. All right. So got to be careful about that. All right. So that's one thing. Secondly, one of the things that, and I mentioned it earlier tonight, that can happen when you have chronic infections, even if the infections are gone, that those infections will have triggered the immune system to overproduce oxidizing agents that can lead to damage to your cell energy factories called mitochondria. Okay. And if you listened, you were here earlier this evening, I mentioned that in another question, but so I won't go into detail here, but I would take a look at my article about how to repair your mitochondria. And the 2 things I would look at are NT factor and glutathione, or if you don't use the NT factor, do ATP 360, okay? And that is NT factor, ATP 360, rebuild the covering of your energy factories called mitochondria. And then the glutathione is a great antioxidant that helps reverse that damage created by the antioxidants. Okay. All right. So I've got 2 articles to show you. Let me just go ahead and show them to you here real quick. All right. So take a look at my how to diagnose chapter on Babesia. And this is the article called How to Diagnose Babesia. And here are the symptoms. So I mentioned a lot of these already. So the night sweats, temperature fluctuations, panic attacks, frontal headaches, so headaches in the front of the head, feeling off balance while walking. And so people sometimes just need to even hold on to the wall so they don't fall down. Air hunger, which is essentially just cannot get enough air from time to time. Racing and skipping of your heart. And my favorite Babesia symptom is deja vu, having lots of regular deja vu. It's an interesting symptom. Not everyone gets it, but if you do have it, it is a really good indicator that your treatment is working if that starts to go away or it goes away with treatment. Okay? All right. All right. So take a look at that. If you had a lot of these and most of them are gone now, then it probably means your Babesia is not active. Okay? All right. And then in terms of the mitochondrial repair, take a look at my chapter on energy and fatigue, and take a look at this article about how to fix mitochondria and get energy back. Okay? All right. All right. Sarita, thank you for the question. Good luck to you. Hello, Christopher. Hi, Dr. Marty. About 3 months ago, I started Sida acuta and Hutania for Bartonella. In the fourth week, my skin started to break out and crust on my cheeks. Yesterday, whatever this is has suddenly spread into the skin under my eyes, and my skin is burning. Have you seen this before with other patients? I've only completed 3 months and I want to continue, but I'm worried that this will spread into my eyes and affect my vision. What do you suggest? So, Chris, it's hard for me to say. I would need to take a look at it. So it's possible you're having an allergic reaction to one of the components. It's also possible that this is an unrelated problem, that it is some kind of a skin infection or other skin condition that has nothing to do with being on Sida acuta and Hutania. So one thing I would do, go see your doctor. Go see your doctor, have your doctor take a look at it. You can tell them that you're on these herbs if you want to or not, but they should be able to tell you whether they think it looks allergic or not. And they should be able to tell you whether they think it's infection or not, or whether it is some type of another kind of skin condition causing this. Okay. All right. So I'm hampered by the fact that I can't look at it. All right. All right. Good luck to you, Christopher. Hello, Sherry. Thanks for saying hi. Hello, Isa. Let's see. My best friend has Lyme and Bartonella, mostly presenting with fatigue and malaise. We have heard different things about exercise. Some say that in this situation, he should limit himself to walking. Others swear by gentle weightlifting every second day. My friend tends to use how he feels as a guide, and when he pushes himself too hard, he feels worse. But knowing how beneficial exercise is for the general health, what do you recommend for patients at this stage of recovery? Thanks so much for all you do to help us. Oh, it's Lisa. Okay. Thank you for letting me know that. So, I mean, it's produced like Lisa, so it's Isa. So thank you for helping me understand how to say your name. I appreciate that. So, Lyme and Lyme disease and chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia are illnesses that act differently with exercise than other health states do. Okay. So while in most health conditions, exercise is beneficial and pushing yourself harder and harder is beneficial, that is not necessarily the story when it comes to chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme disease, and fibromyalgia. There's a phenomenon called neuromediated fatigue, which basically means you get a lot worse if you exercise too hard. And it actually creates physiologic changes in the body that can harm a person, may even hurt their immune system too. All right. So a good guide for anyone with these illnesses is, yes, exercise is good, but I advise my patients to find a level they can tolerate. And once they know what that level is, don't go above it until they start getting better. Okay. And for some people, that could be 10 minutes of walking. For some people, maybe just the ability to move around their apartment, for instance. All right. But in others, so the guide is the way you try to decide how much to do is you look at the level you can do that you don't pay the price for on a regular basis the next day. Okay. All right. And by pay the price, I mean worse energy or maybe body pain or worse thinking. All right. If you're starting to do that on a regular basis and you're feeling worse, then that means you're doing too much too regularly. Okay. All right. And it could hurt. It could hurt recovery, actually. So, Issa, thank you for that question. Yeah, it's a good question. Hello, Lou. Let's see. What do you think of using Plaquenil as an anti-inflammatory, not as treatment for Babesia? So Plaquenil, everyone. It's a good question, Lou. Plaquenil is an old. I mean, it's an older medicine that used to be used to treat malaria. It's a quinine-like medicine. It's a quinine derivative. Okay, and quinine is one of the oldest medicines that we can use to treat malaria, and this is a medicine like quinine. Okay, all right. So Plaquenil. So these days, it's not really used to treat malaria or parasites that act like malaria, like Babesia, right? As many of you know, when we treat for Babesia and Lyme disease, we are using anti-malaria medicines, all right? Now, I would not build a treatment around Plaquenil, though, for Babesia as a germ killer, except there are some ways you can add it to a treatment. I mean, it can be used as a part of something called clindamycin plus Plaquenil. That is a combination that can treat Babesia, although it's got a lot of side effects. So often, most of us are not going to use that, but it can be used as a germ killer in some Babesia treatments. But generally, I would not use it that way. The people that are the number one prescribers of Plaquenil these days are rheumatologists. And that is because Plaquenil actually decreases inflammation. And so rheumatologists use it. It's good at lowering prostaglandin type inflammation and may have the ability to some degree to decrease cytokine inflammation too. In terms of lowering cytokine inflammation, though, which is the kind of inflammation we see from infections, I find herbs probably work better. The ones that I write about, the cytoquel that I mentioned earlier tonight, as well as the curcumin, tend to do a good job. But yeah, Plaquenil can be used as an anti-inflammatory, and I have found benefit in that in some of my patients. Okay, it isn't the kind of anti-inflammatory you would use to get a rapid response. So, for instance, not like you use your Advil or your leaves, all right, but rather it's something you would want to take on a daily basis to help prevent and modulate that inflammation, to keep it under control. Okay, all right. The other thing that Plaquenil can be used for in Lyme treatments is it has the ability to change acid levels inside parts of our cells called vacuoles. You can kind of think of a vacuole as a part of a cell that's kind of like a cave, okay? And Lyme likes to live in vacuoles inside the cells. Other germs like to live there too. What happens when these germs live inside the vacuoles, they create a more acid environment, all right? And so what Plaquenil does is it makes those vacuoles more basic, less acidic, and therefore antibiotics that we use that work inside the cells, like your tetracyclines and your macrolides like Zithromax and Biaxin, they're going to work better in a more alkaline, more basic environment. So Plaquenil has the ability to do that as well too. Okay, all right. Thanks for that question, Lou. Hello, Val. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Can you recommend a CoQ10 product that can be administered through a G tube? Also, have you seen hiccups related to mitochondrial dysfunction? How would you treat this? So I've already talked tonight about how I treat mitochondrial dysfunction, so I'm not going to go into that. You can take a look at that article. I haven't seen hiccups as part of that. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be, but if somebody had, so hiccups often mean that something is irritating the diaphragm, the muscle that goes across, that goes between the abdomen and the lungs. And sometimes that's gas in the intestines that's pushing up there. Sometimes it could be tumors. I mean, it could be a number of things. I haven't seen that related to mitochondrial dysfunction, no. Okay. In terms of a CoQ10 that can go through a G tube, I'm not sure. I would have to look into that. I don't know that off the top of my head. I wasn't familiar. There was a problem using it through G tube. So if you're asking, it must mean that there may be. I would have to investigate that a little bit. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Val. Good luck to you. Hello, Joyce. Let's see. Thank you, Dr. Ross, for doing these webinars and filling in the missing pieces for all of us who suffer from this dreaded disease. You're welcome. It's my pleasure, actually. Thank you. Let's see. I was wondering if you had any experience with any of the following. Joyce, I got to see if there's any. Oh, you did. All right. Let me get the second part of your question here. Sorry, I hit the enter button. I told us. Remember I said, watch that enter button. Let's see. Wonder if you have any experience with the skin color changes, specifically around the ankles. Also, are you aware of anyone who experiences weird rashes like blistery skin? I have been experiencing such on one foot only for about 3 years. Finally, has anyone ever complained of creepy crawly feelings under the skin? I was first diagnosed with Lyme in 2001 after noting a bullseye rash at the back of my left armpit, and the crawly feeling has been felt for several years in that local area. All right, Joyce, I just want to go back and get the full question here again. You were wondering if anyone has experience with any of the following. And that is, let's see, skin color changes around the ankles. All right. So I'll go through one by one. So in terms of the skin color changes that I have seen skin color changes, but they're usually related to something that's more of a side effect of antibiotics than they necessarily are occurring just from Lyme. Okay. So for instance, being on the antibiotic minocycline can sometimes lead to a bronzing of the skin, but usually it's throughout the body. Doxycycline, another tetracycline, can lead to easy sunburning, for instance, okay? But again, it's going to be in areas more than just the ankles. So I haven't seen anything specific to the ankles. The only thing would be is if for some reason you're doing a good job of keeping your whole body covered except for your ankles and you're on tetracyclines and they get exposed to sun, it's possible, but I doubt if that's what you're doing. Let's see. So blistering skin, especially on the feet, often, not always, but often could be a way that a fungal yeast infection, or not a yeast, but a fungus infection of the skin sometimes can give you blistering areas. And being on the feet, because it's moist, would be an area that you could get that. So that could be something to look into if you haven't looked into that with your physicians already, okay? And then the creepy crawly feelings on the skin, that is actually kind of a common thing that can occur in Lyme. I think it has to do with neurologic injury. That tends to be more of a neurologic symptom. I don't believe it's because the spirochetes are still roaming around under your skin, for instance, but probably it's more of a neurologic injury from having Lyme or having had Lyme. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Joyce. Thank you for the question. Hello, Sherry. Let's see. Hello again. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I hope you have resettled comfortably back home. In your work, have you seen any connection between Lyme and scleroderma? Thank you for assistance, Sherry. So, scleroderma, everyone. So, Sherry, yes, I have, and thanks for the question too. So, scleroderma is an autoimmune illness where the immune system starts attacking the connective tissue, the tissues that hold things together in the body, and it causes them to get quite tight, basically. So it's an autoimmune illness, just like lupus is an autoimmune illness and rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune illness. These are illnesses where the body turns on itself, the immune system turns on itself, okay? Now, Lyme disease may trigger autoimmune illnesses to develop, okay? So that would be how I have seen it before. And when I've got somebody that has Lyme and a regular common autoimmune illness like this, one of the things I like to try, and I've had some benefits doing it, is to try to regulate that immune system over attacking, modulate that, okay? And one of the medicines I've liked using is to use low doses of something called naltrexone, also known as low-dose naltrexone, okay? All right. So naltrexone is a narcotic blocker. And so let me tell you what that has to do with autoimmune illness, right? So naltrexone is historically used like in emergency rooms to help deal with people that have narcotic overdoses, all right? But our bodies also have a natural narcotic system in them, and that's in a system called endorphins. We make narcotic-like chemicals called endorphins. And our endorphins basically regulate our immune system and they help regulate pain. If we provide a blockade of our endorphin receptors by using naltrexone, what happens is the brain doesn't like that. The brain starts sending out signals to the endorphin producing cells in the body, telling them to make more endorphins. All right. And the other thing that happens is those endorphin receptors that we have don't like it either. And they start wanting to get their endorphin hit, and they become more sensitive. They increase their sensitivity so that the limited endorphins that are out there have a bigger benefit on them. Okay. All right. So when you block the endorphin receptor with naltrexone, two things happen. More endorphins get made, and the receptors get more sensitive. So what happens then is after that naltrexone wears away, these endorphin receptors get flooded with all this excess endorphins. And one of the things it can do is regulate an overactive immune system. All right. So that might be something for you to take a look at. That would be something to consider. Okay. And yes, I have seen Lyme trigger various autoimmune conditions. Okay. All right. Let me show you the article you can look at on the low dose naltrexone. All right, so I'll just type LDN up here. Okay, so this is my article on low dose naltrexone for Lyme. All right, and I've got a whole video that goes with that there too. And anyhow, it describes what to do, and it even goes through how does it work, and then it also goes through how do you start by dosing it. Okay, now the reason that it is called low dose naltrexone is it's manufactured by the pharmaceutical industry as a 50 milligram pill. But when we use it, we like to start at somewhere around 1 to 1.5 milligrams a day and work slowly up to 4.5 milligrams a day. We want the blockade to go away. All right. And if we did a 50 milligram pill, that those endorphin receptors would stay blocked on an ongoing basis. If we dose at about 1 to 1.5 and work up to 4.5 milligrams a day, that endorphin blockade or receptor blockade is only for about 4 to 6 hours, so that those endorphin receptors get a chance to be flooded with all those excess endorphins eventually. Okay? All right. Thanks for the question. Hello, B. Let's see. Does Rifampin work for Lyme and Bartonella? What other antibiotics should be used with Rifampin? Is there a best antibiotic to protect teeth, which Lyme seems to like? So I'm not aware that Lyme likes teeth. I think sometimes when people with teeth problems, it can be more from possibly side effect of antibiotics, et cetera. Okay. But maybe it does. It just hasn't been something I've been aware of in the years I've been treating it. All right. But in terms of Rifampin is an old tuberculosis medicine that gets inside of cells. It is one antibiotic that can work well against Bartonella. It also can treat Lyme, and specifically what it's doing for Lyme is it's treating cyst Lyme, and it's treating a Lyme that lives inside of cells, or intracellular Lyme. Okay, but it probably doesn't do anything for spirochete Lyme. So when I use Rifampin, I usually, if I'm going to build it into a Lyme treatment, I also want to use something that would treat spirochete Lyme. Remember, Lyme is there's cyst and there's the spirochete, and then Lyme lives inside cells, Lyme lives outside cells. Okay. So usually what I like to do with Rifampin is combine it with a tetracycline, like a doxy or a minocycline, or I like to combine it with a Zithromax or a Biaxin. All of those also get inside of cells, and they, in addition, treat the spirochete. And in addition, they also help treat Bartonella, because I find Bartonella treatments are best if you're using at least 2 antibiotics at a time. Okay? All right. All right. Let me just do a quick screen share here on that. So we're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to point you to read more about this. Take a look at my article on how to treat Bartonella. It's this one called Kills Bartonella Brief Guide. And I explain that I break my treatments down into 3 tiers, of which tier 1 is the rifamycin-based treatment. Rifampin is a rifamycin, okay? And you can combine it either with minocycline, Bactrim, azithromycin. The Bactrim is not necessarily going to work for spirochete Lyme, though, okay? All right. Anyhow, take a look here. You can see what I've written. All right, everyone. That's it. I have enjoyed spending the last hour and a half here with you. I've enjoyed spending the last hour and a half with you here tonight, but I've got two Basenjis, as many of you know, that are getting ready for a walk. I've got to get out for a walk. Anyhow, I keep an eye out for your email tomorrow morning. With that email, I will also have an updated link to sign up for the next series of webinars that will begin in November. Keep in mind, again, we're going to be off next week and the week after that because I am traveling for two conferences I'm going to, including the iLads conference. But in the first Thursday in November, we will have a webinar again, but I'll have the link for you to sign up for that tomorrow. Okay. So keep an eye out for that email tomorrow morning. Again, if you don't get the email, take a look at treatlyme.com, which is my supplement store, or go to treatlyme.net, which is my Lyme disease information site. Both of those, you can find the recording of the webinar there as well, too. All right. Good to visit with everyone tonight. Good luck. And the other thing, keep an eye out. Monday, I plan on launching my new website for my new medical practice here in Seattle, martyrossmd.com. And it will have information on how to start signing up for my online consult visits, my full service visits where you have to see me in person. We'll eventually allow signups for those, but I've got to find where I'm practicing first. I haven't located that yet. But I think I'm near where that's going to be. I think I have some places within a week or two that I should be able to conclude a deal on. Okay. All right. Good night, everyone.